do not have the luxury of institutional and national silos in fighting transnational crime. But we long lost the days when we could spend time in our respective silos, protecting turf, and wondering why people who either are not prosecutors should be asking us questions about what we are doing, or people who are not criminal investigators are interested in what we are doing, or people who are not the Attorney General are interested in what we are doing. Now is the time to build strong institutional and national partnerships, build interdependent relationships amongst our institutions to confront transnational crime. None of us is safe because the transnational nature of the crimes that we are dealing with are such that unless we work together, unless we collaborate, unless we support each other, we will not succeed. We may succeed to do a good job as Kenya or as Uganda or as Tanzania, but that's only for a moment, because soon enough, when it happens next door, it will finally also affect us one way or the other. Two, we in the security sector understand this very well. Some of the criminals we deal with locate in countries or in regions not very far away from here, and they are able to disturb us and stress us. So the deployment of resources, ladies and gentlemen, I think is critical. It's now time for our regional organizations to think about spending resources in an integrated way to deal with crime. I want to call upon the East African community and this association to look at ways of putting together resources we can spend across borders. It's not enough to have budgets in Tanzania or budget in Kenya or budget in Uganda. We should look at how our organizations within the region can put resources we can spend together regionally. And let me pause here to say this. I don't know about other countries, but I'm recently concerned, and because we've been having this conversation with the DPP, about the level of deployment we do in terms of resources to prosecution organizations in our countries. I don't know whether other countries in the region are better resourced or more resourced than our region, than our country. But I know that prosecution agencies are some of those agencies that have been either neglected or sometimes poorly funded in the past. Time is here for us, and I'm calling upon governments in the region to think about putting more resources in prosecution institutions to strengthen them and to ensure that they can do their work effectively. On our part, as government, we have been supporting the independent office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, and I think and hope, DPP, that we will be the first country within the region to come up with a fully fledged independent training institute for prosecutors. Three, I want to urge that we collaborate in research and we connect resource sites. Again, when we are poorly staffed and poorly resourced, the first challenge is to build the capacities of the organizations that we lead. Since we are so endowed within the East African region to have so many higher education institutions, I would like to plead that we do everything we can to build relationships between prosecution organizations and various resource sites. Let's take advantage of the crime research units in our various countries, the crime research laboratories in our various jurisdictions, such as we have tried to do in Kenya to bring together the Crime Research Center and the government chemist to back up the work of the ODPP. And I urge that we do the best we can to support prosecution institutions. Fourthly, DPP, I would like to urge that as governments, we develop very strong political will to support prosecution institutions. Let's face it, the reason why many prosecution institutions are always starved of resources, or the reason why many prosecution institutions are weakened, is because there is no political will to support them. Because prosecutors are oftentimes perceived as probably the enemy around the block. I noticed, and I'm just saying this tongue in cheek, when we had a national celebration the other day at State House, I don't know whether some of you noticed this. During lunch hour, the table that the DPP and the DCI sat was empty. No one wanted to go and sit at that table. Are just sitting on that table on their own. The big people in government who talk about money and budgets didn't want to go and sit near that table. I don't know why. I guess, AG, you probably know. But anyway, I think it will be important as we go forward to support prosecution institutions by developing and giving the sufficient political will to back the work they do. We are going nowhere, and that's the truth of the matter, in fighting transnational crime, in fighting corruption, with weak prosecution institutions in our countries. So time is here for us to invest in these resources. Lastly, I would like to urge that we develop the capacities of our institutions, not just through training, but as I said, by looking at resource relationships between our local institutions and international organizations. It's very good that we are receiving support from some development partners, but I would like to say this, my brother Adan Mohammed, I would like a situation where within East Africa, we are able to fund some of our organizations. We don't have to be dependent on others to fund organizations that do important activities such as prosecution institutions. We should be able to fund our organizations, and we have sufficient resources to fund our organizations. And therefore, I urge private sector and other more endowed institutions to think about supporting our prosecution institutions and capacitating them with resources. Lastly, I would like to assure you, DPP, of our, first of all, respect for the independence of your office as the executive branch of government, and urge colleague executive branches of government across the region to respect the independence of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, and then support the independent offices of the prosecutors with sufficient resources. And most importantly, gather or muster the right political will to support those officers to be able to do what they need to do. I look forward to, as the Attorney General said, to the outcome of this meeting. And whatever that this meeting proposes to us as executive branches to do, DPP undertake that we will do it on our part. We will make our contribution in supporting your office. And I hope that we will get more opportunities to deliberate and to discuss on how we can strengthen the association of prosecutors within the East African region.
The representation of different countries indeed honors the unique bonds between our countries. It also reaffirms the cherished values and ideals of justice and shared prosperity. And by congregating, we eradicate ourselves to building a stronger, united criminal justice system. We rededicate ourselves to building a stronger, united criminal justice system where all citizens of East Africa and our friends from across the region enjoy the shelter of impartial rule of law and the shared progress that comes with it. As we gather here today, these ideals and aspirations we share as a region face an increased threat. The rise of transnational organized crime, deterring, disrupting, and dismantling transnational organized crime is a vision that has brought us here, and it is a mission that binds us together. Over the next 4 days, as we focus and deliberate on increasing our international cooperation and effectively using the justice system to fight transnational crimes, these words from centuries gone by ring true. No man is an island entire of itself, and increasing our regional interconnectedness, interdependence, and interactions are of the essence to combating this threat. East Africa and our region continues to grow more interconnected, and cross-border threats originating from organized criminal groupings that have well-established networks, who have no boundaries in their scope, and mode of operations continue to rise. Modern technology, while a great enabler to economic growth and progress, has widened the circle of opportunity for these criminal elements and enhanced the complex nature of transnational crimes. Organized criminal groups often exploit legitimate activities to advance their agenda through illicit trade, maritime crimes, waste dumping, trafficking of drugs, firearms, wildlife trophies, graft, and human trafficking. Transnational organized crimes have also increasingly involved economic crimes such as money laundering and cyber crimes, involving use of cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Litecoin, among other e-currencies. In recent times, we have prosecuted some of these crimes, and the evidence presented shows that no nation can isolate itself. These threats are able to spread across our borders in an instant. It is against this context that we now understand that our individual countries' security, economic progress, political stability, and cultural advancement must be increasingly anchored in regional cooperation. Our common experience is shared in conversation with many of us in this room, sometimes in the course of duty, or during those moments we seek to compare notes, has presented us with key insights on what aspects and scope our regional cooperation needs to take. Indeed, the EAAP exists to promote and facilitate cooperation among the prosecuting authorities of the partner states on the aspects I have mentioned. We have strived to ensure effective measures and actions are undertaken for the prevention, detection, investigation, and prosecution of crime in the region. We have cooperated on matters of mutual legal assistance, exchange of convicted prisoners, extradition. We have crafted information sharing agreements, cooperated in the investigation and prosecution of crimes, and coordinated in asset forfeiture and recoveries of instrumentalities and proceeds of crime.
Measures have been initiated and will continue to be perfected that require fewer restrictions and less scrutiny where citizens within these countries are traveling from one member state to the other. And at the same time, organized crime syndicates are looking to exploit the relaxed borders and crossing points and to extend the reach across the region and beyond. And that certainly cannot be the intended outcome of our various governments and peoples. It is for this reason, therefore, that we need to be eternally vigilant to ensure that our dream for integration does not result in the creation of a safe haven for persons engaged in organized crime. A man much wiser than I, in the name of John Philpott Curran, observed in July of 1790 that the condition upon which God has given liberty to man is eternal vigilance. As our respective security organs liaise to build capacity in intelligence gathering, surveillance, conduct of investigations, as well as asset tracing and recovery, it is paramount that other players in the criminal justice system work together to facilitate prosecution and enhance conviction rates of persons who would like to take advantage of the free movement of goods and people within the territories. The social contract governing civilized societies obligates us to safeguard against elements that tend to vilify, demean, or violate the dignity of human beings. And as a bigger community, we're becoming increasingly aware of the activities such as human trafficking and the other such like problems which have been mentioned, including the smuggling of drugs and so on. As prosecutors, we must be alive to the deleterious effects within our communities and identify the pain of the victims as we join efforts to protect human rights and uphold the rule of law. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we cannot forget, as has been said by my colleague and others, that corruption has and continues to impact negatively on the economic stability of our nations. The looters and plunderers of our national resources are becoming increasingly adept at making use of lapses in synergy between our national responses to get away with the possibly retained proceeds of corruption. We are therefore called upon to exhibit unity of purpose in combating corruption to ensure the welfare of our nations and future generations.
Transnational organized crime is something that is very close to our hearts as those colleagues who are doing other functions within the East African community. One of the biggest things that happens about this is the fact that there are organized crimes and people who are involved in that on the one hand, but on the other hand, the existence of illicit markets that make some of these crimes possible. And tackling this problem on both sides is very critical. I think a lot of effort and emphasis has been paid in the past on dealing with the organized crime without having to deal with the illicit markets and the demands that are created, partly because more often than not some of these demands are outside of the scope that we have. But it is important to appreciate that the existence of locally based and foreign criminal organizations across our countries is something that is recognized very seriously. And different types of transnational crime do exist. And I just want to highlight a few in terms of sharing with some of the organizations that are involved in some of these, but also the demands that are being created. And just very close to home, I think many of you would know about some of the maritime piracy issues, especially along the coastlines of Somalia, where we have seen significant amount of ransom being sought, and markets exist for actually this kind of activities. Issues around movement of people, trafficking human, whether it is for sex-related issues arising from Eastern Europe to some of the Western European countries, or the migration of people from Africa to Europe on dealing with issues of migration to look for better opportunities. Have seen significant number of deaths on the continent. Issues of environmental crime related to wildlife-related activities, where African countries are becoming the place where crimes are committed, but demands are created in some of the Asian countries. I think one of the biggest threats that is probably emerging that needs to be dealt with is issues around cybercrime. One that is quite difficult to track in terms of its sophistication, the fact that it happens so quickly, and even though footprints can be traced, more often than not, I think the damage would have been done a long time ago and people would have moved on. And we have seen significant number of those events in different places. I think within the context of East African community, I just want to highlight that in order to address these challenges that are global in nature, the partner states of the East African community like many other countries, do acknowledge the existence of these transnational organized crimes that do pose some of these issues. And we have committed to cooperate on matters of peace and security through the implementation of the East Africa Peace and Security Protocol that seeks to ensure that the region is safer, secured, and peaceful for EAC citizens to live and work.
We are gathered to exchange ideas on the issue of transnational cooperation and how to effectively use the criminal justice system to fight transnational organized crime. We are referring to crimes such as terrorism, wildlife trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking, money laundering, and the like. Previously, as you have heard, we were handling these crimes as individual countries and handling the crimes as isolated individual crimes. We have since learned that criminals treat the entire area, from DRC to Kenya, from Ethiopia to Mozambique. They treat it as just one hunting ground for wildlife and wildlife trophies and other products. As far as they are concerned, this is one big country without borders. In a way, they think like the animals during the Great Migration in the Masai Mara. I think we, law enforcement, also need to be thinking like the animals, no borders. Relatedly, they don't see different and isolated crimes of drug, human, and wildlife trafficking and terrorism for the same. It is the same source of funds, and they will use one crime to fund another, and they will shift from one to the other depending on market forces, the level of enforcement and risk, and the level of lucrativeness. It is for those reasons that we are gathered here, and we will continue to gather in order to counter the efforts and effects of transnational organized crime. We must not only gather to counter, but hopefully get ahead of the criminals and institute measures to prevent the crimes before they occur.
It's international and regional cooperation that will assist in getting the best practices to combat crime and corruption. Corruption, unfortunately, is a cancer that scourges the world over. And it is something that we are fighting here in Kenya viciously. We're also getting a progressive judiciary in terms of judgments that come out that say, if you are charged with corruption, you must step aside. Because under our Constitution, Chapter 6, the principles of morality and justice insist that you should step aside until you're either exonerated or otherwise.
The confluence between regional cooperation and combating transnational crime is so complex that in our view, we should actually be devising a course. We should actually teach it as a course in some of our institutions, probably Kenya Institute of Administration or other institutions in the region. But having said that, the key thing to realize here is the fact that we have porous borders in this continent, across the continent. And the issue is, even though the borders and it's porous, there is no border that I know that are different in ethnicity or people who are domiciled in different parts of the border. It's basically the same people. So realization of that as strength is very important. And in this very important topic of how we could use regional cooperation to combat crime, there are certain things our governments must commit to. And one of those includes the understanding and the realization that as prosecutors, you should be able to come from an understanding of multi-sectoral nature of your work.
We recognize the presence of the chief guest. The structure within which so I'll just talk region, and that is why we have invited the greater Eastern Africa. I think that's what there is to know.
Request that we once again, for the benefit of the new
wildlife crimes, illicit violence, terrorism, just to name a few. give no person for criminals to hide in our country. We overcome some of things we want.
As a way forward, I think it will help us as.
Bonjour. Mon nom is
Flori Kamangi. Okay, but you can actually, yeah, you can put on
Good morning, my name is Mahbub Maalim, the Executive Secretary of IGAD. Thank you.
My name is George Kinoti, that is thank you.
Good morning, my name is Wanji.
Good morning, my name is Ali Sandiki.
Yes.
Good morning, my name is Jennifer Berner. I'm a prosecutor from Scotland here with the British High Commission in Kenya.
Paris Voyage from Office of the President, Kenya.
Bonjour.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Brenda, and I have the pleasure.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Kimuyu Kennedy. I'm a Deputy Director with DPP Kenya.
Good morning, Mchinda, Office of the President, Kenya.
Good morning, Protocol observed.
Good morning. My name is Paul Demo, Deputy.
My name is Queen Sadipo from Counter Organized Crime Unit.
Good morning, Rocky from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, Kenya. Morning, Christine Anjala.
Karoga Steven, Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Kenya.
Morning, Victor Mule, Office of the...
Okay. All right. We have about 10 countries represented here. At least know that it is always one of those tough calls when. Okay, I've been advised that been announced, so the person in charge of the video, please get it rolling. Thank you.
However, all this growth in freedom of movement of persons are
Too glad to avoid arrest or prosecution in the event of arrest. The best way to
distinguish between these offenses. They're actually interrelated. They fund each other.
in the eastern center, most of the organized crimes. We overcome some of things in one individual, the other should take charge of it.
I think we are on the right track. When you see those, let's say,